So ladies and gentlemen, let's start. So this is one of the highlights of this global seminar, Distinguished Fellow panel. So just a brief background of this panel and Distinguished Fellow. IAIS has around 20-year history, and when I joined 18 years ago as a secretariat, there was nothing. There was nothing, just goodwill. Knut Hofeld at that time, my boss, Cecilia Miller-Chen, and myself, only 3 staff, and there was nothing. There was no ICPs, no ComFrame, no ICS, nothing. And thanks to goodwill of our members, IAIS achieved huge results, as you have seen yesterday, today. We covered all important areas. And all this history of IAIS, the key issue is person. Association is developed of our members and my colleague secretariat, and also stakeholders. All those members, stakeholders, develop IAIS as it is now. I love IAIS because simply we are very much based on collegialship and friendship shared with same goals. As we discussed today, our share is effective, strong global supervision for the sake of protection of policyholders and financial stability. We work together, we share the goal, and very friendly and constructive manner we develop as we are today. Distinguished Fellow we started around 10 years ago, and those persons specially devote this effort, vision, and association. Association decided to recognize their achievement, contribution to the association. And this year, for example, we recognize 4 new Distinguished Fellows. And these Distinguished Fellows' insight and also wisdom is extremely helpful, and we are thinking what's the best way to communicate our Distinguished Fellow. And this panel is the first exploration how we communicate our Distinguished Fellow, and I'm sure from the beginning that would be an excellent panel. So as a kickoff, I will introduce our distinguished panels. And by the way, in the audience, there are a few other Distinguished Fellows, so I will appreciate to recognize. But first of all, we discuss among these panelists, and I just introduced Distinguished Fellow in this panel. Monica Maechler. When she was in the IAIS, she was a technical committee chair, executive committee member. And as I said yesterday, she is a mother of ComFrame. Without her, ComFrame did not start or did not make it happen. I'm sure that you remember that 2008 we discussed just after financial crisis. In this room, we started ComFrame with Monica and other members. So Monica contributed enormously for IAIS as technical committee chair, and now she's board of Zurich and Deutsche Börse. So I just introduce, thank you very much, Monica, to be here. And yes, Michael Oliver. Michael is long, also outstanding contribution to our association, and British Virgin Island Commissioner, as well as Gibraltar Commissioner. And now you are chairman of insurance company. So particularly, Michael's contribution is our implementation committee, and we work very hard, and you're very strong advocate of regional initiative and our strong implementation committee and emerging market support. And thank you for with us here. Alessandro Iuppa. I know, you might not remember, the first time that I met Alessandro is when I was in Poland around 20 years ago. And we have working very closely for a long period of time. Al was At that time, supervisor is Maine, and the superintendent of State of Maine, NAIC president, and IAIS chairman. And during the chairmanship of IAIS, Al and myself and my secretariat colleague very closely worked, and Al contributed enormously for IAIS. And I remember one snapshot of photo that I'm sure that you remember when we have a Chinese annual conference, your leadership, and we met the Prime Minister of China in the Prime Minister's public official house, and we have very good talk. And since then, our Chinese colleagues are very much involved in the IAIS. So, thank you for being here with us. Hiro Hayasaki is my compatriot, and I have a huge respect to him. Hiro, as I said yesterday, first of all, when he was in the IAIS Vice Chair of EXCO, and also very strong contributor to our financial stability issues. We have a huge attention now, G-SII, but when Hiro started working for the association, it was not at all like this. And I still remember there was no name that Hiro chaired. So a small group or subgroup where it's a specialist group. And Hiro led with only few people and create concept of G-SII framework. It was huge work. We have nothing at the beginning, no data, no concept, nothing. So thanks to Hiro's leadership and his very hands-on work, we developed this NTNI concept, G-SII designation process, and all the conceptual framework. And thanks to Hiro, we have this now G-SII framework. And of course, Hiro have a long background of central bank and of course JFSA, and now he is an advisor to JFSA and Norinchukin Bank. And of course, I forgot to mention the earlier is a Zurich insurance company's important position. So let's kick off. Before kicking off, and we have a preparatory talk, and what we want to discuss here is what we have learned from Wiseman, and particularly Wiseman, just what association should focus in the future. But to reach that goal, first as a kickoff, I would appreciate your concise key message. We have a sort of following up question, but key message that you want to deliver today. One key message, if you could, what you want to say to the association now, and we have a follow-up question in the past, present, and future. But if you could select one key message, what do you want to say to the association now? So, Monica.
Thank you very much, Yoshi. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for the kind introduction. My key message, how could it be different, is please do an effective conclusion of the ComFrame framework. I think it's on a good way, and it should be concluded as soon as possible in order to also facilitate the global distribution of insurance services across the globe.
First of all, if you just perhaps give me a few extra seconds as the newest Distinguished Fellow on this panel, I do very much appreciate the honor that's been bestowed upon me by the association. You made a comment yesterday, I think when you were talking, Yoshi, to Kevin McCarthy, you talked about the IAIS family. And certainly that's a phrase that does resonate with me. I returned to this hotel about 2 or 3 days ago, having not been at an IAIS meeting for 20 months. And it felt as though I was just coming to the next triannual meeting. And it was so good to see sort of my family, my secretariat family, and my fellow supervisor family. In terms of the message that I would want to get across, and it does really, I think, reflect on the the area that I focused on when I was working with the IAIS is that it's all well and fine us developing core principles and standards, but for them to have any practical effect, we have to implement them and work them on a day-to-day basis. If policyholders are going to be protected, if there is going to be financial stability, we don't have to create standards, we have to implement them. So any work that and resources that the IAIS and its members can provide in that area, I think would be very helpful.
Thank you, Yoshi, and I do remember meeting you that first time in Warsaw. He was introduced to me as a member of the Polish authority, and I thought, well, that's awful interesting. And in fact, I even remember the day. It was July 4th, I think, 1997. I guess my message would be that it's important to keep talking to each other, thinking globally, testing different ideas. National pride is a very important component for each of us, but also it's equally important to look at the greater good. This is a global association with a worldwide view, and the issues you're trying to deal with ought to be reflective in the solutions for that. One of the things that I would say that I've really taken away from my time as a participant within the organization is the friendships I've made with colleagues, both professionally and personally, and have been able to leverage those while I was a member, but also since that time. So that would be essentially my message. Keep talking. At times I know it's rather frustrating and difficult and challenging, depending on the issues, but I'm convinced that as an organization that it can get to solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Yoshi. And I'm very glad to be here because this is my first IAIS meeting since I left the Japan FSA 4 years ago. And I'm very glad to catch up with lots of people here. And my first one message is that the task or mandate of the IAIS is to protect policyholders and to contribute to the financial stability. And the G-SII project is important, but only one part of the financial stability issues. So we need lots of things.
Thank you. So just let's move to the more detailed part. So first of all, thank you very much. Very concise and clear message for each of you. So what we are going to do, just see in the past, see in the present, and see in the future. So just kick off from our past. Past meaning that the time that you are very much deeply involved and took leadership position in the association in various areas. First question is why? Why did you commit so much of your time and energy and your thought to the IAIS? What motivates you to work for the association, not only as a task, but as your sort of, your commitment, your devotion? What motivated you?
You want to go?
Okay, first, if you like. I guess before I held my positions, which led me to come here, I used to work at the UK FSA, and I used to work very closely with Martin Roberts, who I think was the chairman of the technical committee. So I'd sort of heard bits and pieces about the IAIS without ever being deeply involved. And then when I took my position at the British Virgin Islands, I found myself as taking over from someone who was a participant in the fraud subcommittee. And really that was what drove me to attend the first set of meetings back in 2003. But I think what I quickly learned was that there's an awful lot of skill, expertise, knowledge within these four walls, within the Secretariat and members. And really what that did for me was it helped me to develop the two regulatory regimes that I subsequently went on to develop. And in particular, what I particularly enjoyed was being able to sit in on committee meetings, even if I wasn't a member of a specific committee, just to hear the thinking and the rationale behind some of the key and important decisions and proposals that were being made. So for me, the reason I carried on doing it, I think for 10 or 11 years, was that it helped me to do my job. It helped me to understand some of the bigger issues. It helped me to implement some of the changes that I did implement in the 2 regulatory bodies that I was part of. And it was pretty good fun, actually. There was some, I think, Al, you mentioned the opportunity for networking opportunities. There's been a great many, a number of people that I've met with. Sometimes you get to talk to people and you give somebody a call outside a meeting. You don't just rely on the IAIS events itself. So that was what kept me going. It helped me do my job better, and it was pretty good fun as well.
So useful and fun.
Yes, I think asked about what made you really committed to the IAIS. I think there are 2 main reasons. One is it's an attraction. It's okay? Yeah, okay, thank you. It's an attraction to international work. So this is what attracted me long ago when I started, when I was doing my first professional experiences. It was really an attraction to the international arena, and in particular, obviously, to search for means to overcome national boundaries and to have an effective international cooperation. However, this is very abstract. And other than that, I think what made me then click and commit to the IAIS were a number of very personal interconnections and meetings. So I remember at my very first meeting, I was kind of attending as a guest a committee meeting of Noël Guibert, who was part of the French supervisory authority and who was with a group of people preparing a very first issues paper on insurance group supervision. And they were struggling with some wording issues, and there was a very friendly and very inclusive dialogue going on, which was also really inviting comments and taking them up. And I think that this very open and very receptive atmosphere, to include also a new colleague into the dialogue, is a very, very good foundation to make people contribute. I have to say also, not because you are sitting here, Yoshi, but you also were very open, very inviting new members, so that was very helpful. And I would like to mention also the then chairman, Michel Flamet, who was extremely encouraging young or newcomers to also contribute and to get involved into the activities. So I hope that you are able to carry this torch forward in terms of also as members of the organization to also bound and invite new members to get involved and to contribute for the future.
Thank you. So this friendship, collegialship with yes create very international field.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, Monica.
Yeah, I think I would concur with both Monica's and Michael's comments. But, you know, perhaps one of the first things that really attracted me was the thought of frequent flyer miles. But in all seriousness, I mean, for those who may not know, I mean, the IAIS actually was formed initially in the US and hosted by the NAIC. And at the time, I felt there was clearly a reason why the US needed to be involved and be meaningfully involved in the organization. And you know, the fact, I think, as Monica mentioned, the international aspect, frankly, is addictive. And the other thing that sort of flows into it, and it's also important, I think, to step back sometimes and kind of consider what's being being done. I mean, the work, for instance, that's being done now is effectively going to change the regulatory environment for this business probably for the next 15, 20, 30 years, depending on whether or not there's some sort of precipitating event. And it was sort of that notion of being able to, in some cases, being able to look into the future and trying to craft policy and solutions to some of the existing issues that were out there. And again, getting back to sort of the cross-cultural aspects of it, since we're all amongst friends here, and some of you have heard me say this before, when I first started coming to meetings, I found that some of my colleagues, non-North American colleagues, could talk and talk and talk and talk, but never come to a decision. On the other hand, I came to the table again with a sort of US perspective, cultural background, where it's like, okay, we've talked, let's make a decision. But I learned to be able to operate in that kind of environment, and I think that's really important.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Alex. Hiro?
Okay, perhaps short answer to why is that perhaps the good aspect of Japanese culture is dedication and hard work. And actually, one good number, perhaps a little bit related to what Al said. I was at the Japan FSA and at the IAIS only for 2 years, but during the 2-year period, I traveled abroad 42 times. And you know, one trip to Europe from Japan takes 14 hours, so you can calculate that. I sort of spend lots of time on the planes, actually. But another reason why I did my best to deal with this G-SII issue is that it's a big challenge to the IAIS, and the challenge was given by the G20 financial ministers and central bank governors and the Financial Stability Board, and unless we can make a clear and good answer to them, that we cannot prove that the IAIS is a very capable and competent organization. And that's, I think, the motivation why I worked so hard. I did my best to do that type of job. And another reason is that I had very good friends, and I find good friends. And the specialist group, it was a very small group, consists of only members from United States, United Kingdom, and Switzerland, France, Germany, and Japan. And I'm not sure Elise is here today, but she's one of the specialist group original members, and John Maroney was the secretary to that group. But it's a very small group. But these small group go together many times a year, or lots of conference calls every 1 week, every 2 weeks. And of course, we had lots of different types of views, but still we worked together to reach a final conclusion. And that was very challenging, but a very exciting process. And that's why I enjoyed working through this very big project.
Thank you, Hiro. So yes, Hiro's group and what Alice mentioned is just sometimes a small group work efficiently, make quick decision, might be more efficient than large group and discuss long period, no decision. But anyway, so let's move on. In the past, and we touched a little bit, in your period of the IAIS, each of you have some special theme or passion or vision and what you wanted to achieve and you achieve it. So could you describe briefly what you achieved during your IAIS period, if you choose one, and why you are so committed to do that? So let's go from Hiro to Monica this time.
Okay, perhaps I must say that I couldn't achieve anything because Yoshi called me that I'm a father of the G-SII project. But the thing is that I just abandoned my child even before he or she was born in 2013, because as I said, actually I was a secondee from the Central Bank of Japan to the FSA, and my secondment period was only for 2 years, so my period expired in July 2012, so I had to go back to the Bank of Japan, so before finalizing this G-SII project. So in that sense, to be honest, I couldn't achieve. But at the same time, I feel that I'm responsible for the outcome of this G-SII project because, yesterday and today we are now looking at a new version of the G-SII project, and new people coming after me did a very great job to improve the methodology and the policy measures type of things. But perhaps I can say that 70% of that project was done when I was in the IAIS and by the time of July 2012. And in that sense, I'm proud of what I did.
Yeah, and I guess following on that, I mean, I personally didn't necessarily achieve anything on my own. It was all done with the help of the membership. I may have been the face of the organization for a few years as chair of the executive committee, but on my own, I couldn't do anything with the organization or externally. I think two of the things I'm particularly most proud about is one, sort of leading an effort to frankly open up the IAIS to what was then observer membership and opening up meetings and the like. I thought that was very important. The other thing that I take pride in is, as chair of the executive committee, I was part of the Financial Stability Forum, you'll recall, the predecessor to the FSB. And one of the things I tried to do there was to let the other folks around the table know that the insurance sector was in the room, that the insurance sector was a very important part of the global economy and needed to be considered in some of their deliberations and the like. And I like to think I was somewhat successful in doing that, and hopefully it continued on afterwards.
Thank you. Michael?
Like Al, I'm not going to claim credit for any one thing. I certainly, over my 11 years, participated in lots of activities. I am just, though, going to pick on one particular activity, which I think was finalized around about 2006. And that came out of the old education subcommittee. And that was the development of the core curriculum modules. Now, my involvement there was as a participant on the education subcommittee and as a contributor to one of the modules. But those modules, and I think there were about 35 of them, at the time I thought were absolutely fantastic. Now, I still think, I look at them, I think they're absolutely fantastic. The challenge is they were very underutilized. And I was very pleased to read in one of the recent IAIS newsletters that something that was being discussed towards the end of my time working with the implementation committee is that those core curriculum modules are going to be revamped and brought up to date and aligned to the new ICPs. And I think that that's very, very important because, as I said, one of the key issues for us as supervisors is to ensure that all of those standards that we set are actually followed through in practice. And to be honest, the core curriculum module does exactly what it says on the cover. It creates a core curriculum of all of the things that a supervisor needs to understand if he is to be a good supervisor. So I would encourage the IAIS to continue that work, but we do have to learn some of the lessons because it's fine putting all of that module into place, but what has to happen is that it has to be used. And perhaps as a suggestion, perhaps we ought to have a distinguished supervisors designation. Because nowadays, and this is something I think that's changed since I first became a supervisor back in 1998, there is much more expected of an insurance supervisor now than I think there was in most parts of the world then. Supervisors are now expected to understand much more in depth about the insurance or the business models that insurers operate. They're meant to understand very much more about how those firms are governed and how those firms manage risk. They're meant to understand things like underwriting and claims, investment management, audit, internal audit, risk management, compliance. And that's an enormous array of skills and expertise that we're expecting our supervisors to hold. So I think we need to give them, particularly those supervisors who work in the smaller jurisdictions. Perhaps some of the larger jurisdictions are able to have specialist teams who can focus on particular areas. But in some of the smaller jurisdictions, that's just not possible. There aren't sufficient resources. So a lot more falls to individuals to undertake a lot more of those activities, be it in developing the policy or even implementing the supervision on a day-to-day basis. And I think, and I'm still firmly of the view that the core curriculum modules offer a very, very good means of disseminating that information. And you know, if we can have chartered accountants and qualified actuaries and chartered insurers, as I am, why can't we have a special designation for supervisors? Why can't we have a distinguished supervisor?
Thank you, Michael. So, Monica?
I would concur with all what has been said by my colleagues. None of us has been able to achieve anything alone. So all was a combination of number of people, of jurisdictions, of individuals to work together and to work towards common goals. However, I think that there is a need, also in such an environment, to really engage the individuals, to take accountability and to do proactive thinking, to develop plans. And if I look back to my period of activity, I do think that there are some specific projects which were really driving that period. So certainly the acknowledgement and the start of the work on insurance group supervision was a very important theme. Also the G-SII topic was an important theme. But if I distill this a little bit, it was also the transition of the IAIS from maybe a little bit of a less organized program focused organization to an organization which started to work on initiatives which were organized over the period of years, staged processes with goals, milestones which have been set for various years. So, for example, when we started ComFrame in 2010, we had, for every year, we had an interim goal, and of course the last interim goal is now also being defined, which was not defined then, which should be the adoption of the program. But also in the G-SII process, one should remember that at that moment in time, the organization had no real capability to address all the data. So it is a great achievement on taking the organization so much forward with a view to be able to manage such a data call, to do the assessment in such an organized manner, and to come up with also a critical evaluation of it. So I think it has been a long way, which has been maybe started at that moment in time, but which people now have carried the torch much, much more forward.
Yoshi, before you move on to the next question, I think the other thing that I want to mention are the insurance core principles, because you'll recall that early on there was no such thing. The IMF and the World Bank were out doing financial sector assessments against various criteria, and they came to us and said, look, we need to have some core principles so that we can actually measure and observe against. And you know, I recall at the time, not necessarily reluctance to produce the core principles, but more of taking a bit of umbrage that our agenda was now being dictated or highly influenced externally. And I've come to realize none of that has changed over the years. But I think the exercise with insurance core principles is something, again, that this organization can be very proud of. I mean, we certainly produced in fairly short order a set of core principles for the IMF and the World Bank to use. But again, right after that, we took another more comprehensive view and assessment of each of those internally and tried to improve them. And obviously the organization did that again subsequent. So I just wanted to make sure we had mentioned that because I think that is a critical contribution by this organization.
Thank you very much. So just to what you have said, or all of you have said, remind me at least how much you have contributed to this association. Monica mentioned this very planned activities, more organized planned activity, particularly ComFrame and also ICPs. And that's exactly the case that since then we try to plan more carefully and actively. And Michael, you stress very much implementation, our educational material like core curriculum. Yes, now we maintain momentum. And Ali, you mentioned very much organizational issue like stakeholder engagement. You started very strongly. Sometimes at the beginning we are kind of shocked, but you can see what we have achieved thanks to your initiative, and also relationship with FSF or FSB is now very important foundation for the association. And Hiro, you kicked off this G-SII issue with small group and achieved huge issues. And all of you stress that it's not you, but of course your leadership is critical. And thanks to you again. Just move to present. You left association in some way or another to the, and you see our association now as sort of, a little bit step back. And what do you see our association? What do you see the key challenge that the association are facing now? It can be standard setting or it can be organizational issue. If you could choose one key challenge, what do you say to us? So it starts from this side, so Monica.
Okay. I think that this is probably the reverse of what I have set out before. We have now made great strides to get to an organized work process with the milestones over a number of years. I think that now the challenge from my perspective will be also to not get fixed to such a process in as much as the organization is not able to also react or proactively look at all the developments which are occurring outside of the organization. And I think that we are in a period where insurance business in particular is evolving at great pace, some analogies more than others. I think it is a question which will probably reach the fundamentals of insurance business in terms of what is the availability of analyzing big data really doing to the insurability and the insurance business in the midterm and in the longer term perspective. What are new technologies doing in terms of, for example, self-driving cars? What does it mean in terms of shift of business mixes? What is the distribution capability changes? What are they doing to the business? So what I think what is extremely important is not to just follow now the path of these programs in absolute terms, but to also have an open, very open antenna to the developments in the outside world, and with a particular focus from my perspective to what I would call new insurance techniques or new insurance in short.
Thank you. Monica?
I think I'm going to focus, Yoshi, on an organizational aspect for the IAIS, because I think you mentioned, or somebody mentioned yesterday, is it 198 members we have? Something in that region, and clearly they're not all represented in this room. And I think, and it was an issue that we tried to address, throughout my time really working with the IAIS. How do we get better engagement with all of those entities or jurisdictions that have taken the time and the effort to become association members, but really have never really participated or even obtained all of the benefits that they can achieve or obtain by being part of the association? So I think my challenge for the IAIS is to keep thinking of ways to improve engagement with those members who are not sitting here today. And by and large, they're going to be the smaller, the emerging, developing markets who have a great need, not necessarily to contribute to the development of international policy, but to have contributions to implement that policy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess my recommendation or my advice would be to remember this is not an abstract initiative or endeavor. The insurance business is a real business. It is a business that oftentimes doesn't always manifest itself front and center, perhaps like some of the other financial sectors, but I really question the ability of any jurisdiction to develop a middle class without insurance, to build an infrastructure and maintain it without insurance, and to keep in mind that every aspect of insurance ends up touching the lives of one way or another of most citizens in each of the countries. The same is true from a business perspective, and it is important to also, when I say it's not an abstract business, that it's also important to garner not only the engagement of the supervisors, but the people who understand, who operate these businesses on a daily basis, who have to live with the supervisory requirements and regulations, who have to live with trade and protectionist measures. But at the end of the day, insurance really can provide both societal as well as practical benefits in a jurisdiction. But it does take a broad view, and it takes a collection of all those views and perspectives.
Thank you, Al. Hiro?
Okay, before talking about the present, can I just talk about one point about the past? and actually, as Monica mentioned, when we did this G-SII project, the biggest challenge was the collection of confidential data. And actually, by that time, the IAIS didn't have any history of collecting data from individual companies, in particular confidential data. So it was quite natural that insurers didn't trust us. But at the end of the day, we managed to do that. And one thing is BIS helped us a lot in terms of not only legal aspect, but also they provided us with the IT system, which are very very strong to the cyber attacks and so on. And this is one thing. But another thing is I want to mention one name of one person. His name is Tom Leonardi. He was the Connecticut State Commissioner, and without him, we couldn't succeed collecting any data from insurance companies. And I owe very much to him. So, and I think because of that, yesterday and today, I understood that for the last 4 years, IAIS have achieved quite a lot. For example, now you're doing the field testing, including collecting data from 45, 42, I've got insurance companies, and it's now possible. It wasn't possible 5 years ago, but it's possible. So this type of progress was based on one person's dedicated work to the IAIS. So that's why I wanted to just mention his name this time. And then talking about the present, and perhaps I agree with what has been said by the three already. And we are facing lots of new challenges, new technology or cyber risks, or climate change, or low or even negative interest rate environments. And these are big challenges, even bigger than in the past. And to tackle these challenges, I think two things are important. And one thing is that as I'm now in the private sector, I finally understood what we were looked at by the private sector. but why I'm saying this is co-work between the supervisors, regulators, and the private sector is quite important, because usually private sector knows much earlier than the regulators and supervisors can anticipate something. That's strong strength of the private sector. So we should co-work. That's one thing. And another thing is, as now I'm working for a private bank, and of course insurance and banking are different, but still we are facing same types of challenges. And so not only co-work within the insurance sector, but also co-work with the banking sector or other academics or other type of sectors or civil society. This co-work with just within the IAIS and with outside IAIS. This is very important, I guess, to deal with, tackle new types of challenges we are facing.
Do you want to add something?
No, I would agree with that, and I think that, and in fact I was talking with a couple of people yesterday, and we were talking about the program for the global seminar, and one of the things that I suggested, you may want to consider putting together a panel with representatives not only from the IAIS, but the Basel Committee and IOSCO, to have a bit of a cross-sectoral type of discussion, and I think that would be useful. And following Hiro's comment about, being in the private sector, looking at it, looking at the issues. I mean, when you think about it in terms of corporate bonds, we're buying bonds, the banks may be buying bonds, but we're doing it for different reasons and how we're utilizing them. And I think it's important to understand those differences. And I think it's safe to say that 5 years ago, there was really not much of an appreciation for the difference in the business model, for the difference in how we look at a balance sheet, focusing on liabilities as opposed to assets and the like. But today, I think that has been pretty much put aside. And I think the IAIS and its members and the industry, perhaps we said it too many times that we're different, but the message has finally gotten through. And I think, again, that's a role that the IAIS can play as an educator and facilitator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Monica.
If I may add consideration to what Al just has said out, I think there was a lot of stressing of differences of business models and of the business, but I am not sure whether the industry and the supervisory community have already managed to analyze where the commonalities and the differences really are. So what is still an open question is the real analysis of the differences in the dynamics of the balance sheet of an insurance company and of a bank. And I am sometimes a little bit concerned that in also the G-SII process, we have sort of gone over that step and have reached a methodology, have enhanced the methodology, but for example, the impact of the reserving process in the insurance balance sheet on the interaction with the other elements, with the capital on the balance sheet, I don't think that we have yet had a chance to analyze those dynamics as profoundly as needed and also have articulated as profoundly as needed. It seems to me that both for the supervisory community and for the industry, this is still a task to make some additional work.
Thank you, Monica. Just one key question that I want to ask you is in the current association, we have a lot of work, as you can see yesterday and today. And Michael Hafman, another distinguished fellow, mentioned yesterday in the panel, and I really think that's a core issue, prioritization. We have so many issues to deal with, and what's the priority, and allocation of resources accordingly. And from your view, if you could choose, we should do more, one, we should do much less, one, please very specific and provocative if you want. So just tell us, we should do more, we should do less. Please choose one each. So this time, I don't know, it's who want to kick off, whoever. So Hiro, you can kick off.
To less is very difficult. I think one thing more is that I think in one of the panels yesterday, as somebody said that we are not facing too big to fail risks, but too many to fail risks. And as I from Japan, and Bank of Japan, my organization was now doing negative interest rate policies, and probably that negative or low interest rate circumstances would be biggest issues, not only for Japan, but also the other developed countries. And it could mean that insurance sectors, now we are safe right now, but nobody knows, who knows that in 10 years' time that the health of the insurance industry would be look like. So I think the biggest challenge for us is under these circumstances, the IAIS needs to sort of, in a good way, to strengthen its supervisory capability or capability to think about the future in terms of the changing environment. That's definitely one thing we should do. And I'm not sure I can say we should do less, but I'm sorry.
So we should do more work, but good, thank you, Hiro.
Yeah, I guess I would take a somewhat similar tack, but perhaps not focusing on the prudential side of the activities. But bear in mind, and I think it was alluded to amongst some of the comments already, I mean, regulation supervision tends to be reactive. In rare circumstances, do supervisors or regulators sort of lead the trend? It tends to be somewhat reactionary. And that's in and of itself not a bad thing, it's just a fact, I think. But when we look out now to the next 5 to 10 years, I think the IAIS has to spend a bit more time in considering how this industry is going to change. In particular, when we're talking about commoditized types of insurance, motor insurance, a homeowner's insurance, and the role technology is going to play in this. And the changes, and to use an overused word, disruptors coming into the market and really changing. I think at the end of the day, underwriting is underwriting. But when we look at distribution channels in particular, I think technology is going to be a very much a factor out there. But then again, we also have the issue of the fintechs and firms who are trying to enter this financial marketplace and doing it in a way that is, perhaps foreign to most of us as to how this business has been managed over the last 400 or 500 years. And we shouldn't lose track of that. Again, I don't know that the IAIS is going to come up with an answer to every possible scenario, but I think that to not do that and give some thought to that is at your peril. In terms of what to do less of, I would suggest have fewer closed meetings. Well, I'll leave it at that.
So it's rather, okay, so not amount of the work, but fewer closed meetings. Okay, good, thank you. I'm also interested in to do less, so both of you have to do more, but.
Well, perhaps when the meetings are open, they can be structured in a way that there's, and I say this not necessarily in a joking matter, but there may be ways where you know, the market participants or the non-supervisor members can be of assistance, whether it's in, you know, small working groups that are made up of both supervisors and industry, you know, things like that. I think you have to be creative in that regard.
Okay, good, thank you. You're always consistent. So, Michael.
I'm consistent.
I go back to, I think it was a meeting, an Exco retreat in Miami about 2012, where we finally addressed the big elephant in the room, which was the International Capital Standard. And was it 12 or 13?
13.
13, okay. And there is no doubt in my mind that is a core thing that we have to address. I'm not going to say it has to be the only thing that we address, but it has to be a core. You can't have an international supervisory regime without an international capital standard. I guess one of the issues that I do have, though, is that we've now moved on 3 years, and we were hearing yesterday of the plans that take us through to 2020, and then somebody stood up in the audience and started making reference to 20 and 30 years down the road, and I was thinking to myself, this is great. The IAIS is really thinking about my grandson. But what about me? You know, I'm a consumer now. Don't I need protecting? So I think it's not necessarily in my mind a difference between more or less. Sometimes there are things that you have to do, and you have to do them smartly, and you have to do them quickly. I sit on the boards of a couple of insurance companies. I'm the chairman of one of them, and one of the phrases that we often talk about is speed to market. And I think one of the phrases that I would like to encourage the IAIS to think about is speed to protection. I mean, if there is really a consumer protection or a financial stability issue that needs to be addressed, it needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And quite frankly, I was quite appalled and quite frustrated and upset that when I started to hear this 20-30 year comment, because you know, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well, and it's worth doing quickly.
Thank you. But I don't hear anything that we should do less. So, Monica, at least you can comment.
It seems to be incumbent on me. And as a matter of fact, yes, I have an impression that there is one area where one could maybe do a little bit of de-emphasizing, and maybe there are also areas where there is maybe room for gaining also some efficiencies. So, in contrast a little bit to Hiro, and I hope that you forgive me this, but I do think that this organization has no dedicated huge resources to CIFI-related questions. So this was one of the driving topics for the last at least 6-7 years. It started immediately after the crisis, when in particular the FSB expected IAIS also to go through this process for every sector to analyze where there is the existence of the systemic risk. There is certainly an issue related to systemic risk which needs to be properly addressed. However, I am a little bit worried that given the fact that there are so many other matters which are in the room for the evolution of insurance for the future, that with this strong focus on systemic risk, there is a systemic risk to a little bit overlook what is occurring around us. And this business development, this business-related perspective gets a little bit driven into the background. So while I see a clear need to have robust approach to systemic risk, I also think that now it's probably time to get to a manageable conclusion, not a perfection of the very, very last point, to have that in place for a number of years, as you have done it. I think this is a sort of a cycle of 3 years. You want to revisit it. and then again allow for some time to look into the present evolution and the challenges which are around. And in this regard, I may draw on an experience which I made when I was a regulator and which I can observe now also. I would also encourage the IAIS to be very specific in articulating what they need as input on ongoing development, on business development, on upcoming threats, on risk to the industry. So be very articulate, very dynamic. I remembered when I was a regulator, sometimes maybe we were not articulating it well enough, but on the other hand, we also felt sometimes that it was not enough practical, tangible substance being offered by the industry in this dialogue. So to have a very effective dialogue on where the journey is going requires probably a sharpening of the communication on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. Thank you. So that also, I think, what Al mentioned, in my understanding though, so we spend so much effort, and I think it's a huge improvement of stakeholder involvement or the dialogue, this one, but what you mentioned is just more specific issue with concrete request and goal identified and start dialogue like fintech issues, cyber issue, or new issues, or macro-prudential issues, and so on. Yeah, thank you. Just let's move on. Just we are now moving a little bit to the future. Key question here is, as you know, that association constantly plan every 5 years what the association should be. And assuming that you are sitting in the executive committee and you're leading association for, or more visionary, or simply put, what you want this association to be in 5 year time. I appreciate your concrete, very visual, but very straightforward. It can be provocative. What you want the IAIS would like to be in 5 year time? So this time I use, or who, yes.
I'm happy to go ahead there. I think within that 5 year time window, I'd like to see the ComFrame concluded. I'd like to see an ICS concluded and put in place. I think that those are probably two of the most significant issues that the association has to deal with. And then also to, again, begin to pay attention to some of the, what I'll call ancillary sort of topics. One that has been certainly percolating within the organization is corporate governance. That has taken on, incredible importance in the corporate world, in particular for financial services. So, I mean, I think something, it goes back to maybe my comment earlier about making some decisions. That, you think about it, the ComFrame's been under discussion since 2010. That's 6 years. Intellectually, it's difficult for me to understand why it's taking so long. Pragmatically, I understand some of the reasons and the sort of the politics with the small p that go around with it. But I really think organizationally that there are certain activities that are engaged today that you need to bring to conclusion. Because as Michael referred to, a good decision today is much better than a perfect decision a year from now. You can always modify, you can always tweak or whatever is necessary.
Just before decision making is a key subject that we discuss among ourselves too. And of course, you contribute a lot. And always challenging where we are doing what. Do you have any advice? Of course, bylaw said that we should vote and make, so how do you suggest, or whoever, to improve this decision making? And you know that how difficult to get consensus and how much time we needed to get agreement. But do you have any specific advice to us, association, how this clear, timely decision could make it happen?
Perhaps I could step in there, Yoshi. I mean, one of the strengths of the association is its inclusiveness. But you used a phrase there, consensus. Consensus means you'll never, ever make a decision. You will never, ever get consensus. You know, almost however small a group of people you have, you will never get consensus. So what you have to give people power and authority to take matters forward. And I think, as Al described, if you can't reach a perfect decision, you reach the best decision you can today. You know, if in the commercial world, if we set our teams a goal of achieving something, we don't want them to come back at the next board meeting and say, well, this is very, very difficult. Can we have another 3 months? And then to come back at the next board meeting and say, well, we've got some ideas, but we still haven't concluded. You know, you do have to give people the authority and the accountability to deliver things, and don't look for protection. Look for perfection. Look for things that are very, very fit for purpose, but not perfection. And like Al, I think you make two very good points. In the next 5 years, one, I think all of those capital standard issues have to be resolved. They can't go on 20 or 30 years. That's just absolutely ridiculous, to be quite frank. And then the second is, although I accept that the ICS is important, let's not think that capital is the answer to all issues. You know, my good friend, who's also a distinguished fellow, who's not here today, and I used to have lunch with him during my time at the FSA, Paul Sharma, produced a report back in 2002 in which he looked at, or his team looked at insurance company failures and near misses. And that was the sort of the predecessor work to what eventually became Solvency II. And the conclusion of that group was that pretty much all failures and near misses were a result of management failure. Poor governance, not understanding what business you were in, not managing the risks that you faced. So I think, like Al, I would think that a good piece, and we've already done a lot of that work with a lot of the ERM work that's been done in the past, is really just to focus on what really good governance looks like, what good risk management looks like in an insurance entity. So to give the supervisors some more ammunition when they go about looking at their firms and trying to understand business models, so that they can understand regulatory risk at both an individual entity and at a group level.
Thank you. Monica?
Yeah, I can only endorse what has been said by Al and by Maechler. I am, of course, hoping that ComFrame comes to a conclusion in a really overseeable time frame, and that it is forming the basis of effective and efficient supervision in a global context, including also a common understanding and a standard for capital. So I do think it is hugely serving as an enablement for business to also meet the requirements and to be spread in a much more effective manner. What, in addition to that, I also would wish to see in 5 years' time, this is that the IAIS is continued and is being seen as the reference address for insurance supervision. So really the state-of-the-art nucleus of insurance supervision, which is a respected partner in the global regulatory, financial discussion. So to bank on all the work you have done and to be able to continue that I wish wholeheartedly to the IAIS.
Thank you, Monica. Hiro?
Yeah, I fully agree with what Al said, and let's make things complete. That's a very short message. And another thing that I think the role of chairperson and the secretariat is quite very, very important for making the meetings successful. Then the chairperson and secretariat should be very fair and keep members informed, and should show clearly some types of options if this is a disputed issue, and then maybe at the end of the day, you should make a decision have to make a choice between the 2 or 3 options. But at the end of the day, you should do that, and you should be courageous to do that.
Thank you very much. So, what you have said in short, so we have to be very sort of practical and make a clear decision with, in accordance with a time schedule, ComFrame, capital, whatever governance, and that will lead, as you Monica said, that the reference point or highly esteemed organization, IAIS, in the international community. Thank you very much. Just thank you. Before opening floor, just there are distinguished fellows in the floor. So just I would like to, some distinguished fellow on the floor, just I would like to seek your wisdom too. I see Walid. Victor is here. No, Victor left. Michael Hafman. No, Michael is there. So why not to Walid? I appreciate, or you are newly distinguished fellow today, the day before yesterday. Could you comment on one key message or what you want to deliver to the association in the future? Yeah. So Walid Janati is a former commissioner of Lebanon, and he is a strong advocate of IAIS, particularly implementation side, vice chair of implementation, and thanks to him we have a strategy of implementation, and now he moved on the lead for private sector banks or director, and Walid contribute huge for association, and the day before yesterday we recognized Walid as new distinguished fellow. So Walid.
Thanks, Yoshi. Well, I would like to build on what Monica and Michael said. And if you allow me, I'll give a small experience. In Lebanon, for 13 years, we didn't have a perfect situation, but from those situations, you can learn a lot. We had a bad law, and for political deadlock, this bad law stayed. And we had to build a supervisory authority with a bad law for 13 years. And in the end, what we were told is that we didn't really have power, but we managed well with authority. And this comment, you can find it in a World Bank report that you can find on internet. So even the World Bank, in one of their missions, they really appreciated that despite such a bad law, we achieved something. We didn't achieve everything, we achieved something. And what I want to get to is not boost what we have done, is that in order to achieve something, we had to work on our competencies. And through our competencies, bit by bit, we started having respect. Because for those who don't know it, Lebanon was for over 60 years with an insurance sector without any supervision. So when you come, you have a difficult time. And in this respect, I learned something, is that, of course, you have to have an excellent law at some point. But with an excellent law and bad competencies, you go nowhere. With a bad law and competencies, you go somewhere. And that, I would like to get to what Michael and Monica said. A lot of developing countries, not all of them, but a lot of them have a situation similar to what we lived in Lebanon. And if we want to get somewhere, the implementation aspect is important. The transfer of knowledge is important, not just of ICPs, and also of the knowledge of how an insurance company works. And Michael, with whom we teamed for long years successfully, agrees with me. We don't really supply supervisors with understanding of an insurance company so that when they supervise it, they understand what those people may be living. We start immediately with the supervisory concepts. We need both. And the second aspect is that the majority, the great majority of developing countries are looking at IAIS for direction to be inspired of. I came into IAIS for exactly the same reason that Michael came into. I had to build a supervisory authority from scratch, and I didn't know where to go. So I came to IAIS, and I think I came at a good time because at that time we could see everything. Now it has become much bigger and much more complex. But we cannot only be a reference to competent countries. They made IAIS. We really are a reference for those who need IAIS today, and increasingly so because there's an international pressure on financial sector to be working properly. So the developing countries need that direction, need to know that they can come to IAIS, and IAIS can supply something, at least a direction, an orientation about how they can develop their competencies, because without the competencies, even with an excellent law, you go nowhere.
Thank you, Walid. Thank you very much. Michael, are you here? Yes, thank you. So Michael Hafman. Michael was chairman of our Solvency Committee, and he was vice superintendent in OSFI Canada, and of course, EXCO members, and he contributed enormously to create foundation of IAIS solvency work, and of course, also he involved very much implementation side too, and now he leads for Trump Center project and many other stuff. So, Michael.
Good. Thank you. Well, I don't disagree with anything that's been said by colleagues on the panel, or Walid for that matter. And I think what struck me, especially in yesterday's sessions with all of the focus on solvency issues, is that it's very much a developed market sort of conversation. And what I would like to see, since a lot of my work is with developing country supervisors, is more of an effort to think about, and not just on the implementation side of things, but even on the standard setting side, how the work of the IAIS can be made more relevant and more practically implementable around the world. You know, I joke, but it's not much of a joke, really. In some countries I go to, I say, well, I've got 3 children and 2 of them are actuaries. And I'm an actuary too, so we've got 3 actuaries. That's more than you have in your whole country. And in fact, in most countries that I go to, just myself is more actuaries than they've got in their whole country. And so when you start talking about very technical things and doing stress testing and internal models and so forth, and you're supervising a country with no actuaries in it, how on earth do you translate that into the day-to-day supervision? And so I think, you know, not to dumb down the standards, I'm not suggesting that, but think about, can they be made clearer, and can the proportionality be more obvious as to you know, what you might do to adjust things if you don't have all of these nice professions in place in your industry and within your supervisory authority. You know, how can you adapt things to suit the local environment? I almost commented at the last panel, but I'll do it now. Over the last couple of years, at some training programs that I've been leading, I've given a financial literacy test to the participants. So we're talking insurance and pension supervisors, some from developing countries, but some from developed countries as well. And the results from one group to the other are almost identical. Okay, so Africa and Asia and North America, no big difference one to the next. And what do I find? The distribution of responses on this simple 5-question test is almost exactly the same as the US general population. And we're not talking about the university-educated US population or the financial literate population, but the population at large. And so my message to the supervisors is 2. One is that you better up your game. Because if you're a financial supervisor and you're not financially literate yourself, how can you be doing a good job? I don't care if you work in the human resources department or if you're working as a frontline supervisor. But secondly, you know, keep that in mind as you're thinking about trying to improve things in your market, and you're relying on financial literacy improvement programs and disclosures to consumers to help deal with some of the problems. Those are both good things, and I don't want to discourage those at all, but be realistic as to how much they can actually accomplish in mitigating that risk. And so, you know, I think there's a big gap between some of the discussions that go on at the IAIS that are very necessarily technical in nature and geared to systemic risk and developed markets, but how do you translate that to the developing markets? So, for example, I'm going to a country in Africa next month to advise them on risk-based capital adequacy requirements. They don't have any there now. Can I use what's been done by the IAIS so far on the global capital standards to help set the framework for what's appropriate in that country? Well, certainly I can use that and try to model it as close as I can, but it would be nice to have something that's a little bit more readily portable. So that's a long message. Sorry for taking so much time, but I think you're on the right track, but a little bit more to allow things to be implementable across the spectrum of the IAIS membership would be useful.
Thank you, Michael. So thank you, Michael and Walid. You stress very much our majority of members, emerging market, developed countries. Of course, we focus very much work on G-SII, capital, ComFrame, but at the same time, we should never forget the importance of majority of our members, emerging markets, and as Michael clearly mentioned, to make our principles, standards implementable and understandable. So thank you very much. So we still have a few more minutes. So yes, Hugh. So yes, please. Please recognize. Please, explain who you are. Many people know, but some of them not know it.
My name's Hugh Saville. I work for the Association of British Insurers, and I'd like to thank you for this session, which for a stakeholder has been a really useful insight into how the IAIS works. And when I look at the decades of experience on the Exco in front of me, and actually, if I count Yoshi, probably centuries of experience, I can ask a question I've always wanted to ask. And it's a very broad question, which is, during that time, all the initiatives you were considering, how much did the cost of your initiatives feature in your discussions?
So you're asking cost? How
cost,
much?
Yes, cost.
Okay. Monetary or emotionally or physically? What kind of?
No. I think that you just got the answer, that it really didn't come into play all that much, if at all. I mean, during my tenure as chair of the executive committee, I really don't recall cost-benefit analysis, those three words being used at any of the sessions. There was always some other imperative for doing what we were doing. And I think it's a legitimate point that you bring up, and it's something as supervisors you have to deal with in your own jurisdiction and determining what that balance is. To what extent is there a real cost in terms of dollars or pounds or yen or florini, whatever the case may be, but also some of the intangible costs. And I'll use an example is the G-SII designation process. There's certainly a cost to complying with the data request and so forth, and those are measurable. What we don't know is what type of consequences and unintended consequences having this G-SII methodology out there is playing in the marketplace. Is it producing a chilling effect in terms of M&A activity? Is it a chilling effect on new product development? And without a clear understanding of what is what is formerly known as NTNI product. So I think, I think it's an important aspect of it. I mean, the flip side is that, the IAIS is made up of government officials, and usually it's public policy that drives the imperative. But I think it's a valid point to think about the costs that are associated with some of these initiatives.
To be clear, it wasn't meant as a criticism.
No, I understand.
I know what drives the decisions. I was just curious to ask. Thank you.
Yoshi, just a comment. I don't think there's ever been a detailed cost-benefit analysis of any key decision taken, certainly whilst I've been a participant in IAIS activities. What I will say is that throughout the 11 years that I was involved, I think it's fair to say the IAIS Secretariat did operate on a shoestring, and there was always very great pressures on limiting the cost from that perspective. And I also come back to one of the comments that I made earlier on about the ICS. And some of the other activities that we've undertaken, they have taken so long to flow through that if they were really important, they ought to have been achieved much more quickly. And I think perhaps one of the messages that might come out of your observation there is, have we actually really thought about why it is that we're doing these things? Are we just responding to direction from others? And certainly, I think that probably was the case with the IAIS 5 or 6 years ago. I think Peter Braunmüller's in chairmanship of the EXCO started to put the IAIS more on the front foot. But yes, there probably was not that detailed cost-benefit analysis. We did as much as we could with as few resources as we had, and quite often we were being reactive and responding to external pressures on us. I hope for the future, and what we can perhaps achieve in 5 years' time, is that we are the masters of our own destiny, and that we do that thorough cost-benefit analysis. I think good observation.
From my perspective, this has to be put also in relation to the maturity of the organization. So, as we have discussed, the IAIS is not a very old organization, so it had to go through a development process. And I don't think that in this development process anybody has been shown attributes of an excessive engagement in spending cost or creating cost, other maybe the travel budget. That is maybe a question which you can raise. However, what I think is that for the future, the cost-benefit analysis of some of the initiatives which have been pursued now for a number of times is probably something which should move up in the attention. And as Maechler said, efficiency is another way to address it. Either it's a cost focus or it's an efficiency and effectiveness focus. And in this regard, I think this efficiency and effectiveness focus is probably something which I would assume from a number of factors from the world outside of IAIS, also the governance, the countries, the member states, everybody expects probably an enhanced focus on this effectiveness and efficiency focus.
Hiro, do you want to say another question? Something about this.
Any questions following up? Or do you want to?
Yeah, perhaps. Just looking at tangible cost, and of course, IAIS has a budget based on the fees from the members, and it used to be from observers as well. And in terms of how to use that, it's one thing, but we must remember that the members and stakeholders, you pay lots of money to come to Budapest and so on. And so it means that, putting together, we use huge amounts of money, and first of all, we shouldn't forget about it. But another aspect is that it's the reason why the contribution from the members and stakeholders are quite important. And we cannot do everything just within the budget limit. So this type of contribution outside budget is quite important for the IAIS to be organized.
Thank you. So we should conclude now. First of all, thank you very much, our distinguished guests and fellows, and all the participants and all the questions. So my taking out with this session is Michael mentioned at the beginning, and we are working as a team and as a family, and this collegial friendship organization is a foundation, and we hope that we maintain this good atmosphere, very frank, open dialogue with members, with our stakeholders. That's critically important for everybody to have a very solid standards and also implementation issue. And just few exchange of discussion in the last part. Valid and Michael mentioned association is association for not only developed countries but emerging market, and the implementation issue, inclusiveness of the association is critical. And in this context, we discuss very much what's the highest priority issues, and of course, we should watch carefully not only specific subject, but what macro issue, where industries go, systemic risk, where the industries move, like fintech, new movement, we should constantly follow. And we have to be very cost efficient, and to produce very timely and concrete result standards, and also that standards should be implementable, understandable, so that not only developed countries, but the emerging market can take advantage. So all these issues, bottom line is thanks to you, Distinguished Fellow, and our colleagues. This dialogue completely reminds me that the association is built by you, our Distinguished Fellow, our members and stakeholders, and we maintain, and all of what you have said to us is very, very valuable, and we take note and we discuss continuously and improve our association. So thank you very much, and we hope that we will continue this kind of dialogue and discussion in a very, relaxed and friendly, collegial manner. So thank you very much. Thank you, and we start our next session at 1:30, so we have around 1 hour break, lunch break. Thank you.